you seeing kind of a disparity, in COVID prep, and talking to job seekers, like some businesses that are stand out doing really well and some that aren't doing so well, or is it more kind of a bell curve distribution?
Well, there's a bell curve distribution, and right now, as it seems, I think ultimately what people are concerned about is the person-to-person contact, where the studies are showing there's a little bit to nothing that will happen with surface contact and doorknobs and what have you. Where there's a crowded environment, I think like classrooms and hospitals and things like that, that could be more of a problem where there's hesitancy. The nurses have spoken up early, but I think what's happened is that the teachers are resisting because that space isn't particularly being considered when they're bringing everybody back to class. So along those lines, in the lower entry jobs and the hourly jobs, of course, that has a lot to do with people and contact. And even though some of that has been rectified, for the fact that the spacing is not going to be up to par in many cases, and that could be a problem, especially if everybody's coming back, and that possibly there are no other checks other than temperature checks are being taken. I think that for the most part, the temperature checks are okay, but for a lot of people, it's not enough.
Yeah. Yeah, no, and we're seeing a lot of that on the legal end of it,
Mhm.
questions about safely returning to work and, the various federal and state guidance. It is a real thicket for folks. So I appreciate it's difficult. So we did get a
Mhm.
question from somebody, and this is someone who says they were terminated from a high level COO type position.
Mhm.
Um, with an association, says she's been seeking a job for even lower level staff, but still no luck. And she wanted to know if you think hiring an executive recruiter is a good idea and any advice on how to find one.
Well, that's a very interesting question because recruiters are not all created equal. Some recruiters are actually are um, are the ones that are working for the company, and you'll have to be able to distinguish the difference between a headhunter and a recruiter. A headhunter is going to work for the person. And sometimes you might have a headhunter that works on the behalf of the person, but also works for the company, which makes very different kind of dynamic. But overall, I think you would have to investigate recruiters. You might be better off find somebody who has experience as an executive recruiter, who might be a career coach, and there are plenty of resources for that. I work with a colleague of mine named Lisa Rangel, who definitely would be able to help in that area. She was an executive recruiter. She had also been an executive and also an executive resume writer. So those kind of resources I don't usually recommend to the average person, but in particular your case, there might be a fit there somewhere. But yeah, that could be the distinguishing factors that people are able to tell the difference of, somebody's going to be for their interest as opposed to the company's interest.
Well, what was the woman's name again? You said, Mike?
Lisa Rangel,
Lisa Rangel.
Rangel.
Okay.
She's a good friend of mine. I've known her for a lot of years now. And that has all that perspective. And then she also works with that. And you could tell her I sent you if you dare to
Okay.
find her on LinkedIn, or you can contact me and I can put you in contact with her.
Okay. And just I usually ask this at the end, and I'll do it again here. But how do people find you?
The voiceofjobseekers.com is the best. And of course, LinkedIn, look for Mark Anthony Dyson.
Yeah. And remind me, you're mostly like a thinker and a writer in this area now, right? You don't do much individual work.
Amongst my years of practitioner experience, yeah, I'm a thinker and a writer. And I'm kind of stuck between being the evangelist and the reporter. because I do write for other publications and large publications, and I get asked by media often, what do I think? So there you go.
Got it. Got it. They're good to know. We got another question from a woman who was with her last position for 12 years. She was wrongfully, she got 46 years of experience in her last position for 12, and she was wrongfully terminated. And she's wanting to know, she doesn't want to go back into the, go back into the exact same role she had before. She wants to know if she should just eliminate that time frame from my resume, or how should she deal with that, which kind of dovetails into our question. What is your recommendation for somebody who maybe has significant job experience in a position that didn't end well?
Yeah, I delved deeply into that last year. As you know, you and I had a show on your show. I
Yes.
got fired, and then on my show, the Voice of Job Seekers podcast. But I think this year is a little bit different because I'm seeing that people who have gotten fired are also getting rehired without a lot of haggle, as far as being asked about what happened at the last job. I think employers are starting to, and that's not for all, but for some of them, but it's significant that they're not asking about what happened at your last job. They just want to be able to prove that you've had the experience that you have. So I would say if there's not a relationship issue with HR, you might be able to just ensure that they're telling people, when if you give a reference, that you worked there, that there was not diving into all the other stuff. If you can do that, you should have no problem. But I think too that people come with the baggage of the past that we were told when we were growing up, and being a baby boomer myself, you were told that if you were fired, that's the end. You can't work in that industry anymore, and that's the death sentence. That's not so much anymore now. A lot of it's in people's mindset that's going to be the end. And I can understand that you've had some maybe traumatic experience that happened when you were fired, but I don't think that's no longer the case. You just need to find out what your reference are going to say and get clarity. You might be able to say, can you just say, I was, that I no longer work there, and let that be the end, and just confirm how long. All I want is another job. I don't need a raving review. I can prove what I can do. So I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And then in fact, neutral references like you were talking about, some companies just do that as a matter of policy, right? No matter
They
how.
want to stay away from the
Exactly.
legalities.
Even if things didn't end poorly, they'll only give a neutral reference because they want to avoid
Yes.
defamation or some other kind of action. I've also seen people, and you can tell me if this is something you've seen, had success, where they're not, let's say you get terminated, or something happens at your previous job. You don't exactly want them to call HR, unless you're going to get that neutral reference, but they'll get somebody else within the organization who can
Mhm.
speak on their behalf, and speak to, as you said, to their skills and what they've done.
Mhm.
I've seen some folks have success with that. I mean, when we interview people, there are times when understandably people are like, they're still working at their other job. I don't want you to contact my current employer. Like, here's somebody else you can talk to that is familiar with my performance, but they don't know I'm interviewing, and so please don't call them. So
I've actually had one brilliant thing. I saw one company do that I worked for. They did, and this was the department, I've got to say, that I worked for in that particular division. What they did was they were smelling potential layoffs. I mean, mass layoffs. Fortunately, it didn't happen until a couple of years later after I'd left. But what they did was they had the vice president of that division wrote everybody a letter about what they did right and how they were an asset to the department, meaning that I could take this letter and go anywhere showing that I worked here. They don't have to work. They just need to verify that person was a person that worked as the VP of that division. If you could keep your emails and things like that, your reviews, that should be substantive enough to prove that you have worked, especially the detail of it all, proving that you've even worked at the level you say you worked at.
Yeah, and in the employment issues that we deal with, it's very common to address this as part of the resolution. What is
Mhm.
the company going to say? Who's going to say it? And you're right. A lot of times we can get, they'll do a written reference because they want to control the language, which is fine.
Yeah.
If everybody can sort of agree on like, hey, this is what we're going to say. So, if your dispute is ongoing, know that it is possible you could get that kind of resolution at the end.
Mhm.
But I think if I hear you correctly, Mark, to this woman's question, um, you shouldn't eliminate a big swath of your resume.
Oh no,
Yeah, you
no,
keep
not
on there,
because
right?
you know what? Who hasn't been fired? My wife is the only one that has not been fired in her job. She just retired after 31 years on a grant, no less. Each year that grant had to be renewed. She stayed in job. She's even got pink slips, but she also kept proof of what she's been able to do. So in case she was able to pivot, and we made sure of that. But ultimately, yeah, if you have proof that you've worked, which you should keep on anyway to prove that, hey, you do have these competencies, then you will be okay. But ultimately, yeah, a lot of employers aren't going to make too much of a stink, especially if you've been fired these days. They want to stay away from the haggle.
Yeah. Another person was saying in the questions here that, in some applications they ask, for government, service, have you been terminated or forced to leave? I'll give my 2 cents and then you can give yours. I mean, I think you, of course, have to be honest. The last thing you want is to get the job and for some reason them to say you were dishonest on the application. I mean, the other one is, again, depending on how, and this is not an avenue that's available to everyone because not all employers will do it. But there are some employers when you leave, even if the original reason was termination, as part of the settlement, they will characterize it as a resignation. And in which case you can answer it as, you resigned. If not, and you were terminated, I would just say you were terminated, right? I mean, like things happen, companies move on, people move on, and I think there's just not anything you can do about that, right? I mean, if somebody's not going to hire you for that reason, then you can't blunt that. But I think a lot of employers, and Mark, I'll let you speak since you're the expert, a lot of employers will still hire. I mean,
Yes,
we've
yes,
hired people that have gotten
absolutely.
fired from other jobs.
Absolutely. It's important for you to be in control of the narrative, no matter
Yeah.
what it is. Even if you have to say, and I've heard people say, I've been terminated. This is the reason why. I've learned, or it was unfortunate, but I'm grateful for. Always end on a positive note. Don't bad mouth anybody, no matter how bad or traumatic the experience was, because whatever you say there, that's the way they're going to pin on you. If you start talking about traumatic instances and how you were wronged and all that, they're going to think back, well, this is how you're going to talk about us if that should happen here. And they don't want that. So, I think the thing is you control the narrative, make it a very short spiel if you decide to go that route, or it may be a non-issue why you left. And I think a lot of people are putting less and less stock in why you left, because a lot of people reason why they left because they didn't try hard enough is one thing I've heard before. But government entities, yeah, they want to know everything. If you apply for a federal government, especially, they want to know every job that you had since you graduated from high school. So they want to know everything. It may, if you had 10 jobs, they want to know 8 of the 10 jobs that you did, and probably the ones that you had during school is the least significant amount
Oh, I
than
know it's crazy.
initially. So you want to keep in mind that is comprehensive. But yeah, you come up with a narrative before you start your job search, before you start clicking the apply is better. So that way you're telling everybody consistently. Because the other dynamic I've seen happen is that if you're in the same industry, people know each other and
Yeah.
people begin to talk to each other. And they can't go too deep because there's some legally bound things, but there's other things that they can say that may not that may cause some concern for a red flag. So you want to keep those things in mind. Be sure you're truthful in whatever you say, and that doesn't side on the error of not being trusted.
Yeah, I think you raise a good point too. I mean, particularly with the government jobs, like, I think you can also point out a pattern, like if your past 12 jobs, like you were terminated, and then one of them you were, well, stuff happens, right?
Yes,
Like I
right,
think, you
right.
can point, say, look, here are my last, 3 or 4 positions, all ended successfully. In this last one, things didn't work out. And look, it happens. I mean, this, Mark, you've seen it from talking to people. It
Yep,
happens to people at every level,
yep,
CEOs, other members of the C-suite, like, you get, it's not uncommon sometimes to get terminated, rightfully or wrongfully. And then you've got to, get back on your haunches and rely on your network and kind of rebuild. I would think today, particularly with the tight job market, and like you say, Mark, like there were a bunch of people terminated
yep,
in 2020 because it was a pandemic.
yep.
So I think that there's probably more leeway perhaps than there has been in recent history, to have success even if you've been terminated.
Yep, and the people who also the employers who classify anything leaving or you being fired as a termination, I mean that they're just terminating like a contract or terminating in terms of agreement, depends on the language, and it's up to you to clarify that and make sure that that they're not using that as a blanket to be misinterpreted by somebody else.
Right. Exactly. Terminated can mean, you can have multiple different meanings of that.
Yes,
Any employment that ends in some respects as it has terminated,
that's right.
but not in the way that a lot of times I think people mean. Well, let me ask you,
Mhm.
for somebody who is like just newly into the job market, perhaps for the first time in a while, or they're still at work and they're thinking about leaving, where would you recommend somebody who's kind of rusty in that department? Should they start? What's like the first, how do they get past that overwhelm and take that first step?
Yeah, there's a lot of that, and there's a lot of that going on in the pandemic. People have been because of um, motherhood, pregnancies, taking care of a sick parent, and all that. Uh, I would say that you can one think of those things as experiences where you've learned from. In other words, you've taken care of a sick parent. There are things that you had to learn. Some people get budgeting experience from taking care of their parents because they have to manage their estate, or the fact that they have to manage their household fund, or if it's been children that you've been able to show resilience and perseverance and many other skills as well, time management, all those things. Try to come up with a package for that particular experience. And then you can go about and start researching companies. And I recommend researching companies as finding about what do they offer, what do they offer that fits me? Do I like the company? Do I like the company's values? Because you want to be happy too working with someone, right? And you
Sure.
want to and also kind of do the market research as far as, okay, I found a position that I like. What other positions are like that across the board? Maybe find about 4 or 5 other companies that offer the same position. Are they the same? Are they different? The values same, but different? And then start looking at what they offer as salary so that you'll be informed going at, okay, going into employers. And sometimes the first question they may ask you these days, especially, is, okay, what do you require as a salary? Now, I would try putting off that discussion as much as I possibly can. But if you're in a hole, then you can give a range, and that's okay. Because in most states, there's this thing called a salary history ban. And I think there's 19 states, not all states had this. And there's about 21 cities uh, that actually have even more specific ban when it comes to employers and banning certain types of history questions. Not all are created, but you should find out the ones that you're considering to working for, or if it's in your current particular state. But to find a resource like that, though, go to HRDive, HRDive.com, and you could put in the search engine salary history, and you'll come up with everything in that document. They keep it updated on a regular basis, so you'll know what to look for. The other thing I would probably research too, if you're going back from those type of situations, is that there are certain leave laws, and you know this, Tom, is there's certain states that have it and certain states that don't. You probably want to look at to see which state has it. But all those things are considered now. I think you should do up front before you start this job search, so that when you're confronted with it, that you don't freak out. You're going in informed. That confidence will come through even more so as you present yourself to an employer. But I would do that as opposed to applying to 100 jobs to Glassdoor or to Indeed in the next month. And the reason is you want to remain in control of your job search and the way you go about it. If you rely on job boards, you have no control. You never know what's going to happen. And it's possible to apply to a couple of hundred jobs and not get a response at all. Instead, find somebody that you can then, maybe is in your network, or start expanding your network and the various tools that we have online, particularly LinkedIn, who works for that company, who can refer you. Now, there's a whole lot in between that, but if you can fill in those gaps, and there's so much internet now that you can do your whole job search without hiring anybody to do it for you, that you could find out all that information to connect those dots. If you can get those referrals, you can also work out how to interview and all that for particular later. But I would start with those particular steps as a whole, to ensure that you take care of everything. And of course, again, be sure that you're reviewing salary information. You're sure and you're exact about what you want out of it, because everything is going to be on the block now, that since we're on remote, since a lot of jobs are remote. And if you don't get a remote job, you have to take a lot of things in consideration.
Yeah, no, that's great stuff. So what you said was HR Dive was the name of
Yeah,
it?
HR Dive. There is an HR Drive, but you don't want that for that information. HR Dive, HRDIVE.com.
Okay. No, great resource. And I'll say, just, as an employer, we hire people. How, to your point, Mark, about knowing something about the company, sometimes just, and I'm going to ask you this question in a minute, like how to do a deep dive on these companies. But like when people will send resumes to our firm, it's clear they know nothing about our firm, right?
Yeah.
Like, and what really stands out is when somebody in their cover letter says something that indicates they've looked at our website.
Right.
I mean, I think, one of the, the double-edged sword about job boards like Indeed, it's great that they really allow you to leverage technology and apply to a bunch of different jobs. But I think, just from my perspective, my limited experience with it, is that a lot of people are just applying just shotgun approach, and they've got a standard cover letter, and they're sending it out, and like, I just follow what it says in the ad. Like in our ad, we'll usually say, like, hey, we want a cover letter. It needs to be, this many words and some indication that you know what we do. So we're telling you, we're telling you what we want. And it's amazing to me how many people just don't do it. Like they'll just send a resume cold, and we just reject them outright. I mean, like, if you can't be bothered to read the ad and follow the, whatever the instructions are in the ad, then you're not going to be a good employee. So let me ask you, so obviously people can go to Google and do a search on a company. Are there any other resources you would suggest that, if somebody's trying to figure out, hey, what's this company really like? Obviously Glassdoor is one. Anything else like that you'd recommend?
Yeah, Glassdoor is a great one, but I'm going to suggest you use guerrilla tactics in order to really get the best depth of information that you're going to need. In other words, hopefully you'll have a LinkedIn account. Hopefully it's 100% filled out, and that you start using the incognito mode on your browser. Each browser has an incognito mode. It's up at the right top of each browser. There's like 3 buttons or something. There's a drop down. You either say private window, if it's like Bing or one of the Microsoft browsers, or incognito like Chrome, and so on. You get the idea. And you can start looking at it, just start Googling people that you try to get to know. In other words, let's say you have a network already and you're in accounting. Of course, you want to be a part of accountants, so accounting network. So one of the things you could do is start joining some of those groups. Then as time goes, you start connecting with some of those people within those groups. And in groups, you get a chance, if it's an active group, then you get a chance to view their conversations, and you get a chance to, you get to know them. And then you can connect with them very easily. And then at some point, contingent, if you can build a relationship with them, start asking them questions. Either can we do Zoom call, can we have phone call, and especially the people who you have a good rapport with, that really works. And it's not always relegated to people in that industry. It could be somebody in that company you might know that might know another person. So you'll start to utilize that person and then help them connect you to that second, what they call second connection contact. And you may even see them on Facebook, and you might even partly know them because you've seen them chat on other threads and other conversations, and you say, oh, okay, I like this person, I like this person's approach. So you start to connect with them, and then you start to have deeper conversations about their company and so forth. So that would be one way, and that can carry it to be a referral. The other part is you can also use my favorite tactic is informational interviews, and that is it's a 180 from the traditional interview, where you're asking someone about their company. You're not asking them, can I work for your company? You're asking them simply information that will help you either within that industry or within that company. And every now and then you might get somebody that referral, but really you're looking for intel. You're looking for what will help give you an inside edge. And then that will also inform your resume. So you'll start updating your resume, and you can see what you have and what you don't have and what you don't need. So between those 2 tactics alone, you should be able to have great in-depth conversations with people who can refer you to other people who could eventually be the referral that you'll need. But it does take a little bit more patience, and it does take a little bit more time. So the best time to implement that is when you do have a job. So, as you know, Tom, I've talked about job search being a lifestyle. If you've made that part of your lifestyle, that could be a very powerful way for you to always be able to transition and toggle between jobs and industries and maybe even careers. For those who are not, you'll have to be a little bit patient because you won't have the advantage per se. Someone else will. But you can also be that hub for information. As you begin to meet people and start to ask them questions, you'll become a valley of knowledge yourself. So you can not only obtain it for yourself to help you apply, but you might be able to help someone else. And sometimes reaching back and helping someone else is just as good as you reaching for someone and getting help, because people remember the goodness of other people. And it can happen both ways. And however many avenues you can use to get a job, it shouldn't be just spraying and praying is what we call. Either you're just sending 100 resumes out or you're applying to 100 jobs. Both have been proven to be ineffective in the past 10 years. So that will get people started and having a more intelligent and thoughtful approach to their job search.
Yeah, I think that's all gold. I completely agree with your approach that you're talking about, and offering something before you ask. Particularly, I think LinkedIn is a great tool for obviously to reaching out to people. It's not as much as it used to be. It used to be that you could really, do an in run, with LinkedIn. Like if you could find the recruiting manager or somebody you want to talk to,
Right.
they'd answer their LinkedIn, whereas
Right.
they might not, you couldn't get to them with email. I think that's changed a little bit, but it's still somewhat true. But when you're reaching out to people, I heard somebody saying this the other day, um, uh, offer them something. And just because you are, what you're coming to them for is, like you said, an informational interview, it doesn't mean that you don't have anything to offer,
Right.
right? It could be,
It's an
maybe a
exchange.
hobby. So, yeah, some hobby that you both share, something that, even just when you contact them to say, hey, I thought you might find this, interesting because I noticed that you blah, 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 we both went to the same college, here's interesting article about the basketball team, whatever it is, can I, have 10 minutes to pick your brain about something,
Mhm.
rather than just coming out for the ask, because, particularly if they are higher up in the company, they're a person in somewhat demand, they'll probably have a lot of people coming to them and asking for that.
Right.
And, so I think it helps even just in a small way to reach out and offer something, even if it's just an area of common interest, and then make the ask. And then of course, be respectful of their time, when you're doing that. But I think that's a great piece of advice. Let me ask you for, so the resume, right? My resume has
Mhm.
been around before social media, before email.
Right.
I remember like one of the first jobs when I first moved to DC ages ago, and I got a job on Capitol Hill. You would have to the only way to apply to it was to take a physical copy of your resume, walk it down, and put it in this cardboard box
Mhm.
in the mailroom. You just dropped it in there and I hope that somebody called you back. Certainly times have changed since then. So tell me, do you think about resumes differently in kind of social media age, or do the basics still apply?
Well, resume, unfortunately, is still a needed document for your job search. Companies live and die off of that. They breathe off of that as far as employment. However, consider that everything on the web is your resume, no matter where you have a presence, because everything counts towards that employer looking at your profile to see if you're a desirable hire. Um, Honestly, you could be hired off of your personality, and if you don't have the particular skills that they're willing to trade you, personalities, there's no training class for that. So companies are willing to hire if it's something that's driven by personality, like sales. You could be taught sales, as well as some others. I've seen people get they get the residency, people going from medical school to their residency at a very big program because of their personality was just right and better than most other people, because it's an industry that's often pigeonholed, especially for the writing, but it's a whole nother thing. But having said that, your resume has to be something that's comprehensible and something that's easy to read. Um, there's a lot of talk about the applicant tracking system and what keywords do and how to trick the ATS. Uh, you can get by with almost any resume if you get a referral, because I've
That's
seen
true.
people get by.
Right.
I use bad resumes and still get a referral, still get the job.
Yeah.
But all in all, that's going to be the first impression of that the employer has of you. So definitely the spelling, the grammar, talking more about what you've accomplished and the results matters more than the responsibilities that you've had in the past, because people need something functional for them to see. They want to see your skills in action. What did you accomplish? It's ultimately what your resume will need to answer, the fit question, so to speak. So all that to say is that your resume, there's enough articles on the web for you to find out how to write one. But the main thing I want to leave you all with as far as a resume is that it is going to be the document that is the window to whether they will call you in for an interview or not. They're not going to call you interview based on your duties and responsibilities. They're going to say, hey, what this guy can do for us, and they'll see that through your accomplishments.
Yeah. And is it still the rule of thumb, like 2 pages? What, I can't remember what it is. Like, how long should your resume be?
Well, since you got a broad spectrum, somebody mentioned the federal government. If you're using the federal government, you're using like usajobs.gov, and your resume could be anywhere from 2 to 20 pages long. Because again, they want to know all of your history. For the private sector and civilian sectors, for the rest of the world, it depends. It's going to look different for journalists than it does for a librarian. It's going to look different for a first line manager than it does a CEO. A first line manager probably will just need 2 pages, although there are times when a third might be needed. A CEO is going to need to may have a myriad of accomplishments, and all that may count. That may include, in some cases, if you're doing research or if you're in a medical field, that you have another page or two of the white papers you've written, the articles that you've written, your TV appearances, et cetera, to be able to have that as back pages to show a part of what you've talked and shown that you have expertise in that particular field. So there's all kinds of answers to that question. For most people, I imagine that the college graduate to have more than 1 page would be extraordinary, but that might be needed. And there are times when 1 page, if you don't have any work experience, but you do have some fraternity leadership and some other student government activities, 1 page may be needed. So this really, I hate when I hear people say that all you need is 2 pages, because everybody's so different in their experience and how they position it and how they see it. So all those things are considered as factors.
How about hiring a resume writer? What are your thoughts on that?
I think everybody needs to learn how to write their own resume and be able to do it. I think most of the people who write resumes or have a resume writer because they want to do because they're trying to save time, valuable time. They might be leading a company, they might be leading a unit. It's very intensive. They don't have the time to do it. I can see that being a case where you need a resume writer, and a lot of times that could be quite costly to get a really good one. There are other times when I think that people just need to learn to write their own resumes, because the process to doing it right is very informative to your career. It also will help prepare you for interviews as well, because interview preparation is almost as critical as writing the resume itself.
Right. Right. No, I think that's great advice. Well, we're nearing the end of our time here.
Okay.
Anything else I haven't asked you about you think folks should know? And then before we sign off, if you could, one last time on the way out, remind people how they can find you and find your writing.
Yeah, I think the disservice that people can do now is leave here and get the next job and don't prepare for the next tour of their career. And that can mean a lot of different things. I think people we're past the days where detaching yourself from your job search is a detriment to your career overall, because a lot of people find out, a lot of the new generation, those of us who went through the Great Recession back in 2008, we learned a great lesson, is that it takes a long time to gear up if you're not prepared to go.
Mhm.
So, unless you're fortunate to be able to afford 6 to 12 months, for most of the world, it's kind of a light year or light years. that you end up behind. So I would say job search is a lifestyle, something you always need to stay connected to. You can follow me for that at thevoiceofjobseekers.com, or follow my LinkedIn profile for that information, as well as all the things that I do and places where I am to talk about it.
Yeah, no, I know you've been in Forbes and Inc. magazine and all that. So I do encourage folks to follow Mark, check out his LinkedIn. There's a good example to how to do a LinkedIn too. I think it's a good place to start. Well, Mark, thank you so much. I appreciate your, as I always do, your incredible expertise in this area. And I'm sure this will not be the last time that we talk. And I wish you all the best.
Yes, hopefully we'll be able to talk during the summer at some point.
That's
I can
right.
have you back on.
That sounds good. All
All
right,
right.
Mark. You take care.
Okay.
Bye-bye.